Thank you for joining me for another episode of Parents Who Write. Today, I am joined by Kellie McIntyre, who is a Southern girl with a passion for culture and adventure travel. So much so that in 2013, Kellie, her husband, and their two daughters traded middle school for a global adventure. That experience led to a first-class education from economy seats. Kellie also shares tips for planning and surviving global family adventures on her travel blog, Forewarned Passports. Kellie, thank you so much for joining me today.
It is so good to be here, Erin. Thank you for having me.
Oh, I'm really excited for this conversation. I loved our chat earlier, and so I'm excited to just dive right in. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Prior to starting your blog, what was your writing background?
It was very minimal. It was mostly research papers. And like a lot of your listeners, I've noticed that a common thread is we think we're going to write when we're on maternity leave, right? So when I was pregnant with my first one, I had a corporate job. And so the idea of being home with a newborn, I thought I was going to have all this time and I was going to write a book on maternity leave. And I was woefully naive about what being a new mom would entail. And so once the baby came, my new goal was, could I just get my teeth brushed before my husband gets home from work at the end of the day? Right. So that was it for 14 years. I shelved all writing, dreams of writing. I mean, besides, boring work writing, but nothing creative for 14 years.
Wow. And yet you describe yourself as a traveler first, not a writer. So where did writing start to come into the picture? What got you started?
When our girls were in middle school and we did what we called the big trip, is we pulled them out of middle school. We traveled around the world for a semester and I had to homeschool. And that was when we started our blog. And it was really just a way to check off social studies in English. For everywhere that we went, we would find a book related to that country. They would read a book. And then I required them to write about the things that we were experiencing and what they were learning. And that checked off reading and writing and social studies. And at the same time, then I started writing for the blog because I started blogging then. So that was where my creative writing journey started. And that was back in 2013.
Wow. Oh my gosh. I always dreamed of being such a traveler, and I did travel quite a bit prior to having kids. I went to Japan, Taiwan, England, Italy, Scotland.
Oh.
Those are my big ones. And my husband didn't even have a passport when I first met him. And that was kind of one of the bars that I would have when I met someone, because a lot of times I would meet guys who would say, oh yeah, I always dreamed of traveling, but they never did anything about it. Or if I said, oh, well, why don't you just buy a ticket somewhere and go? They kind of scoffed at the idea. But when I went on my second date with my husband, I was talking about how much I love traveling. And I really would like to do a big trip like every 2 years. And he was like, yeah, I've never left the country, but it's something I've wanted to do. And I was kind of like, oh, okay, yeah. And then the next date we had, he had already submitted his stuff for his passport. And
you are kidding.
Yeah. And I was like, oh my gosh, you are too good to be true, mister. What? And he did. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. That is such a great story. Well,
thank you.
That really is what attracted my husband and me to each other, is we just had this mutual desire to just go and see as much as we could. And actually, I had a corporate job at the time that I required a lot of just domestic travel for my job. So I had a bunch of frequent flyer miles, and I teased him that he was only dating me for my miles.
I love that. I love that. And then just a quick end to that story. I did get my husband to go overseas. We honeymooned in Italy.
Oh, that is fabulous.
Yeah.
Well, you knew he was the one.
Oh, yeah. I knew
Okay.
after the 5th date. He knew after the 2nd date.
Obviously, he got the
Yeah,
passport.
he did. He did. Okay, this is so not writing, but I have to share this real quick. So right before our 2nd date, I met him on eHarmony. And I had read an article about a way that you can gauge their interest is to not bring up the 2nd date and see if they do. So I was like, okay, cool. Going into the 2nd date, I waited all week. Like later on, we both revealed that it was torture waiting an entire week to see each other again. And at our 2nd date, not only did he bring up the 3rd date and the 4th date and the 5th date, he then also said, and we can do Thanksgiving at my parents' house and Christmas with your family in Florida. And prior, like anybody else on a 2nd date, I was always the kind of person where if I didn't feel it, I was like, goodbye, I'm done. I am not getting invested in this. And when he said that, I was so excited. And I was like, yep, this is pretty, yep, I think this is the one. I can feel it. I'm not going to acknowledge it until the 5th date, but
Right.
yeah. So sorry, I can gush about my husband.
That is a great story.
Thank you.
Great story.
So yes, not only the next date, but also holidays. So what was the catalyst for turning the blog into a memoir for middle grade students?
Well, even though we had this expansive blog, right, where we had written not only during that trip, but I continued the blog through trips after that. And but there was no grand plan for a book. But then COVID happened and right, we all got stuck at home. And like most people, I spent the first couple of weeks binging Netflix, thinking, oh, this isn't so bad. I can do this. And then I was brain dead. And so then I purged everything that I could possibly purge and reorganize. And then once that was done, I don't sit well. And I really needed a project. But really, what I kept coming back to, at that time, everybody, not only did we have COVID going on, there was so much tension in our world. There was just so much division. And I thought if everybody could experience the things that we have experienced through travel, and those lessons that we have learned through travel, the world would be a very different place. And not everybody can go to the far corners of the earth, but everybody can open a book. And that was the first nugget of, I have a story to tell. And I decided to make it middle grade YA versus just another around the world travel memoir. There are tons of them. I love them. I've read many, many of them. There are even many that are about families that have done this, but there are not any out there for a younger audience, for students. And I thought, you can take the kids out of middle school, but you cannot take the middle school out of kids.
Oh, yeah.
And this would be fantastic if I wrote it from my daughter's then 14 and 12-year-old perspectives. They were dealing with all the normal angst and anxiety and all the junk that goes along with adolescence. But not only were they dealing with that, they were constantly navigating new countries, new cultures, new religions. And that combination just really makes for a very entertaining yet eye-opening story.
Yeah. What an experience. I didn't have my first travel abroad experience until 2002 when I was 20. I was 20 years old. And I had met a friend online through chat forums. Remember those things? Giving my age here. And I was studying Japanese language. And that's where I met a friend who was studying abroad from Japan near where I lived in New Jersey. And we started talking. And long story short, when she went back home in 2002 to Niigata, which is in a small little village off the Sea of Japan, I went with her. And it was one of the most memorable moments of my life. I will never forget the feeling of finally traveling abroad, going somewhere that I had dreamed of without my parents, mind you. So like this big step forward in adulthood also. And because of jet lag, waking up at like 4 a.m. and walking down the stairs of her house and sitting down, and they had pushed open the screen doors past the mudroom, and in front of me was just miles of rice fields and purple mountains. It was gorgeous. Just
amazing.
It really was. Like, I will remember that forever. And I remember sitting on those stairs and saying to myself, don't forget this moment. This is magical.
Magical, for sure.
Yeah. So I'm so glad that you were able to create that for your daughters at 12 and 14. Did it feel magical for them at that point?
That is a great question. That is another reason it is written from their perspectives, because, as you know, every great story has a lot of conflict and tension. And my oldest daughter, the one who was in 8th grade at the time, blamed us for ruining her life when we told her that we were going to pull her out of school and travel around the world, right? Mm-hmm. And she, oh my goodness, she was so upset, and the silent treatment and tears and all the teen drama you can imagine. And then the younger one, who was 12, and she was thrilled to get out of 7th grade. I mean, she's like, that's the worst year of middle school. Well, yes, let's do this. But so the book is written in their alternating perspectives. They were well-traveled, but they were used to going for 2 and 3 week trips, right?
Right.
And so for a 14-year-old, you can tolerate spending 24/7 with your parents and sister for 2 to 3 weeks. But 5 months with just mom and dad and sister, that's a whole different ball of wax.
Yes, yeah. That is. Oh my goodness. So how did you prepare for writing this memoir? What resources did you use? What books did you read? What podcasts did you listen to? I can reiterate any of those questions whenever you want.
So the first thing I did was I started binging YouTube videos on everything about the craft of writing, because of course I was very experienced in writing 1,000 to 2,000 word blog posts. I had no idea how to write a story, a 70,000 word story that had to have your inciting incident and your plot points and story structure and character arcs and all that stuff. So I started learning the craft of writing via YouTube. And again, this is COVID shutdown, right? So it's not, even if I'd wanted to enroll in a course there. So that was the first thing I did, was I started just listening AuthorTube and just learning the craft of writing and all the elements and what goes into great storytelling and how that works. And that was one of the things I did. The second thing I did was I went to and read the reviews on tons of travel memoirs, because a lot of travelers have travel blogs. They turn them into a memoir. And so I would read the 1 and 2 star reviews of all of them. And a common complaint is that a lot of these memoirs just read like a series of blog posts, that there was no story. It was just just a series of blog posts. And if you're going to do that, you can just read the blog. You don't need it. So I figured out what people didn't like. Thought, well, I don't want to do those things. And that was where it all started. And then so it took me 3 months to write my first draft.
Okay. That's really fantastic, by the way. First draft in 3 months. Congratulations.
Yes. Well, again, it was COVID. And this is, let me be very clear. I had probably one of the easiest of COVID situations in that I was self-employed. I already worked from home. My daughters were in college. I was not navigating what all of these young parents were having to deal with.
I raised my hand.
Oh,
The torture. Oh gosh. I can't. COVID. Oh, the horror.
And honestly, part of it was guilt that I thought, oh my goodness, I have a gift here. I have a gift of time, and I am not going to squander this. And I am super fortunate that I am in the situation that I'm in where, my kids aren't counting on me to help them get through the school day. A teacher isn't counting on, everyone was self-sufficient, and I was stuck at home and I had time. And so it would have been shame on me had I not used that time for a greater purpose. So that's the only reason it got done in 3 months. It would have taken 3 years if I had, under normal circumstances. I hired 3 different editors to do manuscript critiques.
Oh, I love that.
Yes. So I hired one travel editor. She had spent 20 years with National Geographic. So she really looked at it through the travel lens. And then I hired 2 different editors who specialized in middle grade and young adult. And that was necessary. I would tell anybody who's writing cross genre like that, 2 very different things, to definitely get different editors who specialize in those areas.
Yeah.
And so after each, I got the travel critique first, and then it was an entire rewrite after I got her notes back. Before I started this journey, I didn't understand all the different types of editing. I would just hear the term editor and thought, oh, that's just someone who just, looks for punctuation errors. And typos.
I love it.
I didn't understand all the different types.
Developmental, line editor, proofreader. I'm a line editor, by the way.
Okay. Yes. Well, I know what that is now. So I got very top level manuscript critiques. Here are the holes. This is what it needs. This is what, this is where it's missing the mark, all that. Total rewrite. And then I sent it to the next editor to look at it through the lens of middle grade, YA. Another total rewrite, and then the third one, another full rewrite. So it took a year to edit it. 3 months to draft, a year to edit. But it was the feedback from those editors that made the book, without a doubt. It is so important to bring a professional in and get professional feedback.
I appreciate hearing that. That warms my heart. Thank you. And also, I'm really glad that you had such a good experience with good editors who can look at your work and say, I see what your goal is. This is what's working toward it. This is what's distracting from it. Here's where I'm seeing the holes. And then they're not telling you how to write the book, but they're telling you how to maximize what it is that you're trying to do.
Oh, you're exactly right. And that was something else I didn't realize is my misconception was that that an editor fixed what was wrong. No, they just tell you what is wrong and tell you to fix it at a developmental level.
Yes.
They aren't giving you solutions. They're just saying you have issues with that. Just one that comes to mind on the very first one was, it was a travel memoir. So of course there was an external journey. That was easy. That's just location. But it was, what was lacking was the internal journey.
Interesting.
And so, right. So it was like, oh, okay. Internal journey. So just big picture stuff like that. That's critical. That is critical to making a story great.
Yes. So like I said, I am a line editor, and I work with a developmental editor. We're a team. And so she looked at my novel that I'm working on right now, and she came back to me and she's like, so, this character, Marcia, she kind of disappears after like 3 chapters. We never see from her. I was like, yeah, I know. I kind of thought about that. And she's like, yeah, so you're going to do something about that, right? And I was like, yeah, but thank you for bringing that to the forefront of my mind, because it was just kind of tucked back there like, Marcia really did disappear.
Well,
So.
it's funny too how these things, a lot of the things you just are hoping they're not an issue, and then they bring them up and you're like, yeah, okay.
Yeah. Like I've got my eye on other things, so I'm just going to sweep that one off to the side. But then when somebody else
Right.
comes in and says, this is an issue, and you're like, yeah, okay. And part of my reason why Marcia disappeared is because I didn't know what to do with her character. But then my developmental editor said, you have a hole in your story here, and Marcia can fill it. And I was like, oh my gosh, you're right. Now I know what to do with her. She can totally, like, those two things come together perfectly. So, yeah, the fun of working with editors. So where did you find your editors? Because I've heard, I don't want to bash services in particular. I also know that with editors, the truth of the matter is you get what you pay for. And I know that not everybody out there can afford $2,000 to $4,000 for an editor. But,
Right.
there's also the flip side of getting editors whose first language is in English, or they don't get back to you. I've heard some nightmare stories.
I have two. I have a friend who also has a travel memoir, and I don't remember where she found her editor, but it was one of those nightmare stories. But all of mine came through Readsy.
Okay.
And so there's a vetting process, and there's an accountability process.
Yeah.
And so, you are getting a qualified editor who will also do the job in the time that they promised to do it. And I have nothing but great things to say about that process.
That's fantastic.
And I would also say, in my experience, like with my story, from a big picture point of view, it didn't need a full developmental edit because it was a true story, maybe because I wasn't trying to create a world or create characters. And so for each of mine, I did a manuscript critique, which was like a mini developmental edit. So it wasn't as expensive because, especially since I hired 3 different people, I cannot imagine if I had done like a full developmental edit with all 3.
That's awesome. I'm really glad you were able to have that experience. Yeah. Developmental editors are phenomenal. So what were the big takeaways from all that research?
That basically that a memoir, a travel memoir, is not a series of blog posts, right? But that ultimately your memoir, even though it's nonfiction, it needs to read like fiction. When someone is reading your story, they need to feel like they're reading a novel. It just happens to be true.
I completely agree with that. You still want to use creative writing techniques in your nonfiction. That's one of the things that I loved experimenting with my own blog, Life Beyond Parenting, when I started writing again after my depression and my anxiety, my identity crisis, all the fun things that happened over the last few years. When I started writing again, I was working with nonfiction, but I started applying creative writing techniques to it. So they were actually, my blog posts were more of creative writing, creative nonfiction, personal essays.
Well, it makes them much more interesting to read.
And personal. That vulnerability pulls people in, because that vulnerability is what people relate to and identify with. Yeah, that's fantastic.
Absolutely.
So what was it like writing from your kids' perspectives? What did your kids think about this project? And how did they respond to you writing this book?
I did not tell them at first, partly because I really didn't know if I would see the project through. How many people say, oh, I'm going to write a book and actually write a book, right? And I think I doubted myself that I would really do this thing because dadgum, it is hard work writing a book. So anyway, I didn't tell them until I had written for about a month. So I had about a third of it done.
Okay.
And I would sit on the porch every morning. I'd get up really early. And that was one thing that I found for myself because I already worked from home. And the work that I do is very administrative and bookkeeping and just business management. My desk space, I don't know, it was like my brain just went into admin mode when I would sit at my desk. And so I had to create a different place to write. And so that ended up being the porch. And so I would get up very early and go sit on the porch. And that was my creative space. Anyway, after about a month, I handed what I'd written so far to my oldest daughter. And now at this point, because all this happened when they were 12 and 14, well, now they were 21 maybe and 19-ish, I guess. That's how old they were. And anyway, the oldest one sat down and she started reading and then her face went white and then she started fanning her face and she said, oh my gosh, all my middle school anxiety is flooding back. Oh. And so she read it and she said, you nailed us. You completely, authentically captured who we were, what our issues were, our anxieties, our wants, our desires, just everything. And that was very affirming because it's written first person point of view from their perspectives, but I was there for all of it because we were together, not, 24/7 for 5 months. So every single scene in real life, I mean, I'm there. I'm part of what happened. I just wrote it through their lens instead of mine.
Right.
But hey, no one knows their kids like their mom, right?
I agree. I totally agree. Yes.
And just the different things, especially girls, middle school, we can all remember.
Tough time. Tough time.
Yes. And let me say and this is something I really want your listeners to take away because I know so many of your listeners have young kids, right? I'm at the other end of the spectrum, I think, than a lot of your listeners. Now my children are young adults. And I know how hard it is to write when you have little ones. It is such a struggle. But I could not have written this book 8 years ago when they were in the middle of everything because we needed this gift of time for them to grow up, for them to be able to read this and appreciate it and laugh about the things that they were anxious about.
The perspective that you gain with time.
Yes. For sure. Yeah. For sure. And we had no plans for a book when we went on this trip and started this travel blog. And had I not blogged, had I not required my daughters to blog, we would not have had this trove of source material to write this story. And so to your parents who are struggling to find the time or whatever you're doing today that may seem small, it may end up being something really big down the road. You just don't know. So you don't have to write an epic anything now. You just have to write. And you just don't know what it can turn into down the road.
I love that. That's such a beautiful message. Thank you. Yeah. Especially even just a diary. It doesn't have to be a blog. You never know where it's going to appear in your writing later on. But you get to hold on to those memories and go back to them. Yeah.
Well, that I'm glad you said that because not only did I have the girls' blog posts that I use as source materials, but I had their journals that they kept that, that they allowed me to. Yes. So that stuff is priceless. You just never know where um, where it can take you in the future.
Yeah, no, that's 100% true. Thank you for sharing that. So let's see. We are coming toward the end of your show. What advice do you have for other parents who want to write to help nudge them along, in addition to this trove of information that you can create just with journaling?
I would say do not let lack of education or formal education, that you don't think you have the right credentials or the right training, don't let that hold you back, because you don't need a formal degree. You can learn the craft through books, through podcasts, through videos. Exactly. You can learn everything that you need and just write, just start. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be perfect. It won't be perfect. It won't be perfect. That's why it took 4 times longer for me to edit the book than to write the book. I think that's the biggest takeaway, but you've got to have something to edit. So just put something down.
Yes. I tell my clients a lot of times, we can turn crummy writing into better writing, but you can't do that if you have just a blank page. A blank page is going to stay a blank page until you put words down. So it doesn't matter if they are crummy. It's okay. We make them better. Right now, we're just capturing ideas and thoughts and just get the story down. So,
right.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So, my last question that I always ask is, what are some of your favorite books and why?
Yes. Okay. Most of my favorite books, they tend to be memoirs, but they tend to be set in other countries, the books that have stuck with me over time. Like, of course, I read tons of stuff and you enjoy it. That was a great book. But the things that come back to me over and over again are books like, I just finished The Girl with Seven Names, and it was a young woman's story escaping North Korea.
Oh, wow.
Then there's also Escape from Camp 14, which is another North Korea escape story, which is amazing.
Wow.
There's A Long Way Gone, which was about a boy soldier in Sierra Leone. I think it gives perspective on life. It really helps when I'm having a bad day, when you're like, okay, now these are real problems. These are real problems. I don't have real problems.
Yeah.
And before we go to places, like, for instance, before we went to Cambodia, we read First They Killed My Father, and that was about Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge and the genocide of the Cambodian people in the 70s.
Wow.
So that's what I read a lot of that. But fun fact. Before we went to Myanmar, I was told to read From the Land of Green Ghosts. And this is the book to read if you go to Myanmar. Well, I had it with me. I had read it before we went, but I took it along because I kept insisting that my husband read it. I'm like, you have to read this book. Anyway, so it turns out we had a driver at some point, and he was like, we'll be going through so-and-so town. And I'm like, oh, that's the town that this author was from. And he was like, oh yeah, do you want to go meet him? He took us to his house, showed up. He signed, I happen to have the book. He signed the book. Craziest story. But he was the first Burmese to go to Cambridge University, but it's his story. It's one that you should read now, just because things are not great again. In Myanmar, we were lucky to have gone there when things were stable, and they're not now. But
wow.
Anyway, that was just like a crazy, fangirl author moment.
Yeah.
And then my husband said one day, he said, okay, we just randomly showed up at this author's house. What if one day somebody randomly shows up at our house?
Right?
Oh,
You'll be like, I got my pen.
that's right. Bring me that book. I'll sign it.
It's so interesting when you do meet people that you admire like that. I am part of a podcast coaching program. And so I hear these people on their podcasts all the time and I look up to them. But then all of a sudden to like be in a coaching call with them now and I'm talking to them face to face and I'm like, oh my gosh, like imposter syndrome sets in. And I'm like, I should not be here. What am I doing talking to you? And it's such an exciting moment when something like that happens. And side note, all of my podcasting coaches have been nothing but supportive and encouraging. And it's exciting to see that they believe in what I'm doing also. So talk about a boost right there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, before we go, do you have any last message for our listeners? Your contact information is in the show notes along with a URL where they can buy your book. But is there anything else that you would like to share before we go?
Well, this is just a fun little nugget in that my book, which is called The Passport Project, Two Sisters Ditch Middle School for a Life-Changing Journey Around the World, is now being used by some middle schools to teach geography and social studies.
Wow.
Yes, because it's all the stuff woven, it's all the stuff they're learning about as far as cultures and places and people and religions, but it's all delivered through this really relatable, entertaining narrative coming from these two middle school girls.
Wow. How did you find out that the Passport Project is being used in schools like that?
Right when it was released, I was invited to go speak to a middle school. And oh my goodness, I was so nervous. And at the end of the day, the teachers came up to me and they said, every student will be required to read your book next year. And it will be a formal part of our curriculum. I was like, okay. And so that is where it has started. And so I've got 2 schools now, and other middle schools are reviewing it, and we will see where it goes.
Oh my goodness, that is so exciting. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Oh, well, the link for the Passport Project is in the show notes. So I think it would be an entertaining read even for grown-ups.
It is. It has been read and reviewed by people 9 to 88. That is the range. Men, women, young and old, boys, girls.
I'm so thrilled for you. I mean,
Thank you.
the other thing I wanted to put that out there is 5% of people who say they want to write a book actually finish writing their book. You are in the 5%. And then out of that 5% who actually finish writing their book, only 1% actually publish it. So be proud, my friend. You did amazing. You did amazing. And I just love the fact that you were able to pull from your daughter's experience, and it's a family project in that way, and that it's about opening up people's perspectives. It's what I love about traveling 100% is being able to experience life through other people's eyes and their lives. And that's also what I've always loved about reading is the opportunity to be able to see the world from another person's perspective, to walk in their shoes. So you not only lived and did that, but then also made a book about that. So that's just beautiful. And let's add one more question then. Where's your one of your favorite places that you have traveled to?
That is such a tough question, but
or like really memorable experience, like sitting on those stairs and seeing the rice field patties.
I guess my short answer is, I think for culture, my favorite place I've been is Myanmar. For like physical adventure, New Zealand. For wildlife, Namibia in South Africa. Of course, I love everything about Europe and everywhere. I don't know. I can't narrow it down. I love most places.
I love how you picked out the things that you love from different places. rather than just one aspect. So that's pretty cool. And is it just me, or does the tea genuinely taste different in England than it does here?
It can genuinely taste different.
It must be the water. I don't understand. Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been a fantastic chat.
I have enjoyed it, but I always love talking travel with anyone who loves to travel. So
yeah.
Thank you, Erin. You have a great night.
You too. Bye.
Bye.